Meeting of the Town Council. We thank you for being with us as we do the town's business. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
James Morelli.
Here.
Christopher Palmieri.
Here.
Jack Perry.
Here.
Paul Jablonski.
Here.
Michael Del Santo.
Present.
Valerie DiPaolo.
Here.
William Diedzik.
Here.
Tom Lombardi.
Here.
Victoria Triano.
Here. Let's all stand for the prayer, followed by our flag salute.
Heavenly Father, give us the ability this night to see past what is first apparent and into the very heart of issues that are presented. Keep us open and willing to hear the concerns of the people of this community, and give us the courage to act upon those things which are best for Southington. Amen.
Amen. We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. May I have a motion on the minutes of our prior meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 14th meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Do I have a
Second, Madam Chair.
And I have a second with Mike. All those in favor signify by, let me just ask if there's any discussions, any addition, any deletion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on, councilperson's communication. I would like to start this with just a couple of very quick things, and then I'll let everyone else go ahead. I received information from First Congregational Church and Pastor Ron Brown that on this coming Sunday, April the 3rd, there will be a prayer vigil for peace in Ukraine and all over the world. It's going to be at 6 o'clock in the meeting house, and everyone in town is invited. You'll start to see handouts and all about that, and so we're very grateful to Pastor Ron. Yes, go ahead.
Can I just make a comment on that? I also shared that news with the Ukrainian National Home in Hartford. I'm on their email distribution list, and I saw that today they emailed it out. So the
wonderful.
Southington event is being broadcast to the greater community.
That's wonderful.
Taking part in these. So thank you.
Also, there is a family in town right now who are coming in. We have someone in our town who had her mother and sister and I believe brother and cousin. She flew over to the Ukraine, and because they're not refugees, they are part of the family, so they were allowed to come under the family distinction, and they are coming into Southington. And I just read that Safe Harbor, which is an organization dedicated to folks that must leave their homeland, also have a family that's coming into Southington. It is wonderful that we not only talk about good things, but we're doing good things in town. And we will hear more about these families as time goes on. And it's an honor to have them with us. And I'm sure everyone in town will make them feel like family. So I wanted to mention that. And then the last thing, I wanted to extend a congratulations to Diane Thompson, who is now the executive director of SOCA. And on behalf of the entire town and this council, I'm sure she's going to do a wonderful job. So those were my couple of things. I'm going to open it up to council peoples.
Madam Chair, I have something.
Sure.
This Thursday night at 7 o'clock right here in this room, the Planning and Zoning Commission is having a special meeting. The draft plan is available for the affordable housing plan. So this Thursday at 7 p.m. here in this room, the public is welcome for public input.
Good. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This past week, we had a number of us had an opportunity to join the superintendent and the Board of Education chair and Board of Finance and some other guests to walk the fields at Southington High School and see the entire sports complex and some of the proposed upgrades that will be presented a little bit later today. It was quite enlightening to see some of them. We definitely have some, what I would say, serious safety issues that need to be addressed short term. And I know the Board of Education is working on those to ensure that they are safe for continued operation. But certainly, I think longer term, there are definitely some safety related things that I think we need to address as well. So looking forward to hearing the proposal. And it was great to also a shout out to the Unico Club for a very nice dinner again. And thank you to those who were able to attend the Unico dinner.
Great. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to give a brief shout out to the Southington Catholic basketball team. They just wrapped up their season, undefeated season. They were the Waterbury Parochial League champions and the Hartford Parochial League champions. And I believe it's April 1st through April 3rd. They're going up to Burlington, Vermont to compete in what I believe is a New England tournament. So just a fantastic season for the Southington Catholic basketball team. Secondly, this past Friday, March 25th, Councilwoman DiPaolo, Chairwoman Triano, and myself had the honor of presenting a proclamation to retired firefighter Edward Ozga Jr. Edward Ozga Jr. served the town for 28 years as a volunteer firefighter, a very distinguished career. I know the chiefs were there, and he's very well respected, and we just thank him on behalf of the town for his years of service and wish him a happy retirement.
Great.
That's all I have this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Chris.
A couple updates just to share. We all know that STEPS came and talked about their new curriculum with the police department. So just to update members of the audience, STEPS was now approached by a marketing company for the new curriculum. They'll be taking it, licensing it, and selling it nationally, which is really fantastic that it originated here. STEPS will also receive 10% royalty for all the curriculum that they're working towards. Also, a little closer to home, New Britain Police Department is so interested, they're actually going to be sending officers to attend the training with our Southington Police Department, and they're going to pilot our new curriculum in New Britain schools as well, so that's exciting. And then finally, the STEPS community survey was administered about a month ago, and the board will be meeting on April 4th to review the data, and then the board will be deciding how to disseminate that out to the community at large. So stay tuned for that. And I have one more good news type item. I'd like to encourage the community to support LEAF. LEAF is applying for a grant with Nature's Path, and this is the grant supports community garden projects across North America to grow organic food and nourish communities. So in order to receive the grant, and if you go online, you can see there's a lot of competition there, but you can vote specifically for the LEAF project, and it is the school garden, although there are school gardens at all our elementary schools and our 2 middle schools, they are actually supporting the DiPaolo Middle School garden this year. So if you're interested, you can go online and vote. And if I could, I can submit this in the minutes so
that'd
people
be
can
great.
see there's the website right there. But time is of the essence. The voting is for this week. So as soon as we can get that out there, the better.
Yeah, that's great. I already voted.
All right, good.
Yeah, I was on there. Is that it, Chris?
That's it.
Anybody else?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I want to first thank everyone for showing up the last couple meetings. It's been a full house, and I appreciate everyone's time. The meetings have been a little long, but I appreciate that, as well as all the emails that we've been receiving as a council. We do read them all, can't reply to all of them, but we've received almost 50 emails between insurance concerns as well as the flag ordinance. So I want to just thank the Southington residents and town employees for all the efforts and showing up and sending those emails. Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else?
Madam Chair?
Yes, of course, Al. Yeah.
So just a couple things. I wanted to just mention DECA. I know it was announced at the Board of Ed meeting. So 10 students from DECA qualified for their national competition, which is great. And we always talk about DECA and what a great program it is at the high school. So 10 students did qualify. 5 students are going to be able to go to the national competition in Atlanta. So I just wanted to name the 5 students. So seniors are Jack Hurley, Anthony Senna, Maxwell Hodgkiss, And then there's 2 underclassmen, Eli Colada and Jason Hurley. So just wanted to, congrats to them and the advisors and wish them the best of luck.
Val, do you know where Nationals is this year?
It's in Atlanta,
great.
Georgia. And I believe I spoke with Sandy Spinello today. April 22nd, they're leaving. So just
Nice, yeah,
they do
very
such a
good.
great job for the high school. And Madam Chair, we had been discussing FOI, Freedom of Information. And I think a lot of people that come to these meetings understand, just how important the Freedom of Information Act is. What it does is it promotes transparency in our local government. It allows access to our residents to public records and our meetings and things like that. So I'd like to request if we could possibly, as a council, discuss having the FOI commission, the public education officer for the commission. His name is Thomas Hennick. If he could come to Southington and do a workshop. They go into towns. He's been from January till tonight. I think he has a session. He's been in a lot of towns, across the state. And I just think that we have so many new boards. I mean, so many new people on boards and commissions, and this would be something, not just for Democrats, Republicans, but all the people that we have now that are registered as unaffiliated voters that are serving on the boards and commissions. It protects all of us that are serving, but it also protects the community in the sense that it keeps that ability for transparency and having things done properly.
Val, what I would suggest, I'm certainly not opposed to it, but I want to know more what we're talking about and what he does and what the purpose would be and what the focus would be. Would you mind getting some stuff together, and at the next meeting we can have a discussion on that and see where we are?
Yeah, as long as, if you want to put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes, I think that would be fine, but
Okay.
we need information on it before we can act on it. And because I'm not really sure, in all the years I've been here, I've never had anybody from the FOI come down to educate. So I'm not opposed to it necessarily, but I would like to understand the focus of what he would be doing.
It
and-
really would be, Madam Chair, it really would be, what are the rules? What are the rules for FOI? How should meetings be noticed? Timeframes, minutes, when those should be posted, just all the rules for FOI.
Would that be different than our town attorney when we ask our town attorney for that
I think
information?
it's an excellent thing to do.
If I may, Madam Chair, Tom has come to the town, maybe not this board, but I've had him come to the town for planning and zoning when
Oh,
when he was.
okay.
It's a nice
I'm looking-
educational tool. In fact, when I was town attorney, the town attorney and assistant town attorney would always go with that. So Tom is very, very good, and that's his whole job, is to educate locals, so.
Very
that's
good,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you put that together, we'll put it on for our next meeting, okay, Val?
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody? Hearing none more? Let's move on. Item A, Fire Department Master Plan Presentation. You're up, Chief, and the rest of you.
Madam Councilwoman, council members, Mr. Manager, good evening. My name is Stuart McCutcheon, and with me is Mary Ellen Harper, and we represent Emergency Services Consulting International. And so, we're here tonight to give you a presentation on the fire department community risk assessment and master plan that we conducted. And so, sort of right off the top, just as we proceed through this, it's my understanding that you all have not the opportunity to review the report, and so we're going to basically touch on the highlights, but it dives much deeper and into detail than what we're at tonight. And being cognizant of you all's time, we're just kind of hitting the highlights and more happy to answer any questions. But with that said, I don't feel it's our job to come in and tell you all what to do. We don't pay the taxes. We're not running the calls. It's not our community. It's our job to provide you with the information and the baseline findings based on your data. And then based on that, you all decide and make an informed, educated decision what's best for your community. And so if we're able to present that information to you and you're able to obtain a better understanding and make data-driven decisions or well-informed decisions that you think are good for the community, then that's a win for us, and that's what we're here to achieve. So it's just a little bit of background on this. So we had some delay in this with the whole COVID thing. But so on April 17th, 2020, the town contracted ESCI for the master plan and the community risk assessment. Because of COVID and other things and inabilities to travel, this has lagged out a little longer than it ordinarily would have. But I think everything kind of went sideways during that time. But what we're here to do is evaluate current operational service delivery, because if you don't know where you're at, it's hard to figure out where you're going. Next, identify some future service delivery needs. Where do we want to be, and then provide some recommendations. And so again, these recommendations, we're providing these not to tell you all what to do, but to give you some ideas. These look like some feasible and viable options for you to pursue, but completely up to you all whether or not you would like to pursue it in that way. And just a little notes, this project was initiated under Chief Butler, but again was significantly delayed. Chief Paul and Assistant Chief Heath came in subsequent to that, and so we worked through them with this process. The data sets, because of the just the time lag on this project, they go up through 2019, so it's not the most current data, and there were some data quality issues, but some of those things are addressed within recommendations. And so within those recommendations as well, subsequent to this, you have also paid for a strategic plan. And so really when you look at these recommendations or options, there's two things going on. There's policy decisions and there's operational recommendations. So operational recommendations, let's look at the data quality we have and get some things in place to better collect better data. That's something operationally very easily internally to do. Policy decisions, we want to build stations, add folks, do those sort of things. Those are policy decisions and decisions for you all. And so they're broken sort of into two categories. So the strategic plan will really be looking at, what are these things that are important to you all and are important to the fire department? And then identifying the few things, because we can't do everything at once, but identify the few things that we want to do and set up a plan for how are we going to achieve these, what are the timelines, and who's responsible. And so that way this report doesn't sit on the shelf. It's something that can be a living document, continue forward. And it is 250 pages. So again, this is just the highlights. But I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions we have once we go through the service delivery section. So service delivery, this is based on your data. Where are you at today? This is what our data is telling us. So right, wrong, or indifferent, the data that we're collecting, this is the answers they're telling us. So we start off with population density. And so I just want to call your attention. We have the 4 fire stations running from north or south, bisecting the town. And you can see with 5 at the top, 2 at the bottom, and darker the color green, the more population. Well, typically, the more people you have in an area, the more service demand you're going to have, because without people, there is no demand for services. The 2 staff stations currently are in the middle at Station 1 and at the top at Station 5. But what you also see is that leaves a lot of area of highly populated area, these densely populated area, without the staff capability. It's my understanding that here in the very near future, we will have staffing at a 3rd station during the day. So steps have already been taken to correct that. But this is just based on where we were at when we did this at this time. So that was one of the things you'll see highlighted in that, is we might want to look at adding additional coverage, which you've already done. Here's our service demand by type and incident. And so, in other parts of the country, there's large black bars of the total for that year. But, in fire rescue type operations, you're going to see about 70-80% EMS. Southington doesn't operate as a fire rescue, as a fire department. So the call balances are much more consistent throughout, with the exception of service calls, which is service call, a canceled or that good intent, or a false alarm, are all basically non-emergency calls that the fire department's running to. And I'm not at all advocating that you don't go to those. However, things like false alarms, high false alarm rates usually mean we need to do some more work on our fire prevention to get that number down. Some of the service calls and good intents, if somebody thinks something's wrong, they should absolutely call. But sometimes there's things going on in the background that we can look through our data and say, how can we reduce that? Because particularly when you're trying to maintain a volunteer cadre within your fire department, if you burn folks out running non-emergent calls, their excitement about getting up and doing those starts to dissipate a little bit. So those are some of the things we talk about in that area. This is temporal variation. And so what we're looking at is, based on different breakdowns of time, what patterns emerge. And so for you all, as you get into June and then the end of summer, call volume goes up on the top left. To the top right is day of week. So you're busier during the weekday than the weekends. And that makes sense. People are up and moving and they're more active. And the bottom one is as hour of day. So we start at midnight. So as people start waking up in the morning, you become more active. Midday, you're rocking and rolling. And then by the afternoon to early evening, it starts to taper off. And so, looking at ideas like if we need to put folks in, what's the optimum time to do it? That's where this information or rest, so that you can make data-informed decisions. These are projected 4 and 8 minute travel times. So the way we did this, we used Esri's proprietary system, but basically the same way Waze or Google Maps or anything else tells you it'll take you 15 minutes today and 20 minutes tomorrow to get somewhere. It's projected travel time based on 8 o'clock in the morning. And so there's two things going on. We have 2 staff stations and 2 unstaffed stations. If we had folks at the station, there's the projected coverage on the left. Currently is what we have on the right. And, if we think back to that populated area map, there's some populated areas that fall outside of an 8-minute travel time. And then, certainly outside of the green. And when we're looking at fire rescue and deployment models and things of that nature, to boil down to its essence, there's really only ever 2 problems. Either you can't get there from here, there's not a station close enough, or there are not enough units within that station to service the demand. So for example, if I had a unit that is running all day and night and they're never in service, well, that unit's never there to respond to the call. So even if the station's well placed, we would need more units there. And throughout the service delivery, you'll see those things explained. Next, we just kind of touching on ISO because it's a big issue for most towns wanting to understand the ISO. So just a side note to this, the ladder 3 was sold in December 2021 and working on a replacement now. But this isn't, the time delay isn't necessarily a Southington issue, it's a nationwide issue. There's no parts, there's no raw materials. Getting a hold of an apparatus is extremely difficult. 2 years is probably the best case scenario for not just y'all. You could be, somewhere in California or Houston, Texas, or any of those folks. There's long delays. So anything that you're looking to do apparatus wise, particularly in these times, we'd probably recommend getting the ball rolling sooner than later, just because of that time like it's going to occur. But when you look at your ISO coverage, it's 1.5 miles. That 1.5 miles, they're trying to estimate what a 4-minute travel time would be in a suburban or urban area. And if you compare between the 4-minute travel and that, they're fairly similar. And it was just, this came from a time when, many communities didn't have GIS and couldn't do those types of projections. The bottom right is your ladder company coverage, because ladder companies aren't typically first due. They're forming the balance the effective response force, which is how many people do we need on a scene to get the job done with enough folks. And that's an 8-minute time, so there's a 2.5-minute travel time there. ISO uses as an estimate. As far as fire station coverage, ISO wants you to be within 5 miles of a fire station. Everyone in town's covered there. And then the bottom right is your water supply. And as you can see, 1,000 feet from a hydrant, you're pretty well covered up with water supply. So I wouldn't anticipate any type of split rating when ISO rolls through. This is talking about that effective response force again. And so the reason it's important is because if we want to do interior firefighter operations, we're required, everybody in the country, is to have 2 people inside, 2 people outside. When we run a 3-person crew, there's no 2 in, 2 out. There are no interior fire operations. We can do life safety. If we see somebody is inside, we can do life safety to jump in and grab them. But even that gets a little iffy at times, just depending on the conditions and what's going on. With 4 showing up initially, you could do the 2 in, 2 out and technically be within side OSHA 29 CFR guidelines. But so this is a comparison just to see for the sake of argument. Again, you've already committed to adding the folks, but what the difference would be in your coverage areas between adding additional 3 people in this instance, or maybe if you added people into other stations so you get that 4-person coverage, and really just to kind of give you the foundation of this is what it would look like if you exercise a few different options. Here's a structured fire order of arrival. Now, the reason that all is less than the first unit and the second unit is because these data sets are so small. And when you have small data sets, your reliability on the accuracy of that answer is a little questionable, because you're not doing actual working structure fires every day of the week. It only happens a handful of times a year. So that's why the number changes a little bit there. But again, where we're at today, the first unit, 90% of the time when other units are rolling in for an active working fire, is about, travel time, is about a little over 9 minutes for that first unit, and we're at about 12 minutes for that second unit. And so when we get into performance, I'll go into this a little bit deeper. There's a time continuum of all the events that happen, and I'll go in that, and it's just a little more detail here in a minute. So now we're at call processing. So the call continuum is someone calls 911. It goes to a PSAP or to your comm center or your public safety answering point. Someone answers the phone. They say, what's your emergency, fire, EMS, or law enforcement? You say it's fire. It goes to a different group of call takers who take your call information. It's then passed to a dispatcher who dispatches that information to the appropriate fire department and unit. So all of that together, calling call processing. And so NFPA 1710 and 1221 call for actually 1221 calls for 1 minute and 4 seconds for 90% of your calls at the 90th percentile. These numbers are going to look big if you've ever looked at averages, and there's a reason for it. The reason the 90th percentile is used is because fire department and EMS and law enforcement type data is not contained within a normally distributed data set. So things like weather patterns, things that are very common year over year, and it's going to get hot in the summer and cold in the winter, they have a normal distribution. And when your distribution, your average is the same as the median or the 50th percentile, that's when the average is the correct statistic. Fire, EMS, and law enforcement data is all pushed and skewed to one side. And because of that, the average wouldn't be right because the median and the average won't be the same answer. But also averages, if you had one really large outlier, it can really pull that average. So for example, if I had 9 calls where I got out the door in a minute, and the 10th call we had some kind of problem and it took me 12 minutes, my average is going to shift dramatically, even though my 90th percentile and my mean or median 50th percentile would have been in the same place. So national standards uses 90th percentile is going to be bigger than you've seen if you've seen averages.
Before he moves on, before he moves on.
Excuse me, just 1 second, Chris, go
Is that
ahead.
okay? On this slide, when you're talking about the target, this 1 minute, 4 seconds, where is that? Where do you get that figure from?
That is from NFPA 1710, which is ISO bases everything they do off of NFPA 1710. It's the national consensus standard for career and volunteer fire departments providing fire, EMS, and special operations. And so that's what you're going to see as a reference as you go through. And it's explained in more detail in the report, but you can get with your chief as well, and he can explain it to you. It's not a requirement. You don't have to do it, but it's a national consensus standard to say, hey, this would be the target to shoot for.
Do you have any idea how many, I think our response time is very good in town, but when I look at the call for 1 minute, 4 seconds, and we're in 3 minutes, is that concerning or?
Well, what I would tell you is 3 minutes is not outside of normal. Smoking fast places, ones at 1 minute 20, minute and 30, but they're working really hard at it. I would say if I just had to come in and say, what do I think your call processing is going to be? 2.5, 3.5 minutes would be my initial guess. Sometimes I get surprised. Sometimes it's longer because there's processes called emergency medical dispatch or emergency fire dispatch. And they start going through all these lists of questions in that little decision tree, and they won't dispatch the call until the end. But if you have a complicated call, like the house is on fire and someone's in cardiac arrest and they're trapped upstairs, that's multiple decision trees. And so like in the county, I came in from Central Florida. We were finding out for a cardiac arrest or working structure fires and stroke alerts 7.5 to 8 minutes before the first unit was ever dispatched, which is a problem. It's a major problem, but we were able to fix it because we started looking at our data and understanding what's our baseline. And, a bad answer isn't necessarily a bad answer like we're not doing a good job. It could just be that this is something we need to look at and investigate deeper and see how we can make it better. And that's really the purpose of this.
And then to your point earlier, when we open the new fire station, these figures are based upon the current station. So when we
2019 to
Safer
2016.
grant and we pull in the other firefighters and open another station, overall for the town, these numbers should probably be closer to the target.
I would expect for it to get better, but I think that's something you should monitor. So that way you can see what's the bang for your buck. There's some station location stuff where we built models to try to see where would be basically the most bang for your buck. And as you add more stations with your call volume remaining constant, your return on investment is going to decrease. So, maybe you pick up 20% by adding this third group, but maybe you only pick up 5% for adding a fourth group. Now you're to that policy decision, is the juice worth the squeeze for, what we're putting in for what we're getting out. But, that's why we're trying to provide this baseline information so y'all have some of that information to think about and to decide what the answer is, what's the right answer for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So call processing starts at I make a call to 911 and they say help's on the way. The next is turnout time. Turnout time is the time from the initial dispatch until we get in a unit and we're driving down the road towards the call. So turnout time is 60 seconds for pretty much all of your calls. Fire and special operations will go out to 80 seconds. But for all calls, we're looking at about 1:33, which isn't bad. It's really pretty good for performance for your staff that's in the stations. And then about, just shy of 11 minutes for all calls for your volunteer group. They're coming from other places. Again, this isn't the average. This is 90% of the time or better. This is the answer. And so, that may well be reasonable for you all. But just so we could provide that information, we compared those two. I tell you, it's not always people not wanting to get out as fast as they can. There's things like station design. If you have your bunker room way the back of this side of the station, and it takes 45 seconds to walk into the engine bay and get the door open and go, well, you'd almost have to be wide awake at any given time, ready to go to get there and keep it under the 60 seconds. So any subsequent or future stations, that's one of the things to take in consideration is how does our station layout affect our folks' ability to get out the door quickly. Next is travel time. So we rolled up the doors, we fired up the truck, the wheels begin turning, we go en route, and this is the time from en route until we arrive on the scene. So really you wouldn't expect a lot of difference between career or volunteer on this because it takes the amount of time it takes to drive somewhere. And that's pretty well reflective, 8:35 or 8:25 and 8:19. And there were much fewer calls for the volunteers. So again, the reliability would be a little less on how, heavy I'd want to hang my hat just because of the smaller data sets, but they're about the same. The difference is that, the national consensus standard, again, NFPA 1710 is looking for 4 minutes, 90% of the time. And we're in excess of 8 minutes. 90% of the time. We're already at double the travel times, and I think we're going to see that reflective as we start legging this continuum out. So these are the first major pieces: call processing. I put a call in the 911 to dispatch the units. The units got the call, they got in their rig, and they started rolling it. We got the first unit on scene. So that is the continuing together. You're a combination department, and so there's a thing called response times at NFPA 1720, which is the standard for volunteer fire departments and combinations. And so they want to look at response time. So because that, we included this information as well, just so we can answer the question, well, what would our response time be? You can't necessarily add these two together, like travel time and turnout time, and get response time, because they're different data sets. If I am not very good at recording route times, but I'm very good at recording dispatch and on scene times, my data sets are going to be different sizes. And again, if I have one data set of a smaller size, my reliability is not there. And we're looking at these data sets as whole sets. So the numbers won't exactly add up, but it gives us an idea of where we're at. So we were about a minute and a half. In this case, we're about a minute and a half for turnout overall, and we're about an 8.5 for travel. And so we're about 9.5 for all calls for response. So dispatch to on scene. In our areas where we're dependent on the volunteers, it's about double that. And, I'm not at all insinuating you do anything other than trying to sustain your volunteer force for as long as possible. But here's the baseline information to begin with, just so we know what we're looking at. And then final total response time. This is the person, when you call 911, this is what you're going to experience in Southington 90% of the time or better. When I call 911, from the time I pick up the telephone and hit send to the first unit arrives is going to be about 12.5 minutes.
We just stop you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you detail the EMS numbers that are on there? Because we have a separate ambulance service. That doesn't take into account ambulance response.
No, sir. This is just the fire department response to EMS typed calls.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So this is what the person on the street experiences. And the reason this is important, because remember I told you earlier about the 7.5, 8.5 minutes for complicated calls. We would get banged out. We're in the trucks. 2 minutes to get to the scene where we're going to. We're ready to rock and roll. When we get there, and everybody was angry with us because they said, we called 10, 12 minutes ago. Where have you been? Well, we just found out about it a few minutes ago, and we're here doing our thing. But those other pieces where we're dependent on other either agencies or other external organizations can really affect your performance, and that's why it's good to know what the big picture looks like. So again, for all calls, about 12.5 minutes, so your first unit shows up 90% of the time or better. And then for fires, we're a little over 12. EMS, we're at about 11 minutes. So it's going to take some time to get there based on our current deployment model, which again, I would anticipate to get better with your new deployment model. And so then we go into future delivery models. So this is just to give an idea of some projections of where do we think things are going, and do we need to be planning for the big boom, or are we pretty well on the same track where we're saying? And so looking at your population, we looked at a couple of different things. This is your historic. It's growing, but not by leaps and bounds. There is some growth there. With some of the projections, we're basically low end from 42.5 to about 47,000. But, for all intents and purposes, we're a pretty stable population base. A stable population base, we probably can anticipate a fairly stable call volume or service demand base along with that, which is here. And, we're talking the difference between 2,200 and 2,400 calls. So between a couple of stations on an annual basis, this should be something that could be absorbed. And so with that, before we go into the options and recommendations, I wanted to pause and just see if anyone has any questions I can answer for you. Again, I moved pretty quickly. There's a lot more depth.
I did have one question when you talked about the slide for the 2 and 4, the 1710 responses that go in and out. Could you go over that again real quick?
Which slide was that?
It was when you were talking about in and out, 2 and 3.
Oh, 2 and 2 out? Sure. Let's see. Oh, I've zoomed past it.
I think,
Okay. So,
no, not that one. You had one that talked about, I interpreted it as you can't go in a house unless you have 3 or 4 people there. You have
Four
to stay
people.
outside.
Or
2 and
2 and
two
2.
29 CFR. So what it is basically a buddy system, because we send 2 guys in and they go down and there's nobody to get them out. They're
Right.
not coming out.
But don't we have 3 on a truck or we have 4 on a truck?
3.
Okay.
And so and it's not that you can't do anything. Life safety takes a precedence over suppression. What I would say is this. So we're pretend that door isn't there. We have an internal room. Let's say that room catches on fire. With 4 folks, we come inside, we pop this door, and we put the room out. With only 3, you're pretty well limited to trying to find a window or something that you can get to externally, pop it, you stick the hose in and cowtail it and hope for the best, because you're not going inside. Just basically your risk management of, is the person's life worth more than this building? And I mean, at the end of the day, if something catches on fire and it gets past a certain point, the building's being taken to the ground. It's probably got insurance on it, or it doesn't. But either way, the damage is done. And so, we don't want to risk anyone's life for something that is probably going to be bulldozed and rebuilt with insurance money later anyway.
I never heard that rule, but I know that firemen don't follow rules anyway, so they run in it.
It depends on where you're at. You wouldn't have a job anymore in Central Florida doing that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I turn it over to Mary Ellen?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, Mary Ellen.
You already messed me up. Just got to the wrong slide. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the long-term opportunities and some of the short-term recommendations that are contained within your report. Just a little bit of background. In order to come up with these recommendations, it's a combination of both qualitative data and quantitative data. The qualitative data are feelings. I don't like, way people feel. So we met with volunteer firefighters, we met with paid firefighters, we met with members of the union. We conducted a number of phone calls, because at that point we were in COVID, with elected officials, appointed officials, town employees. And we really basically spoke to anybody that was willing to speak with us to get themes, identify things that were priorities for the people that we were talking to. We followed that up by doing online anonymous surveys, and that gave us the quantitative data. So we could add numbers to these feelings and see 98% of the people had this opinion, 45 did that. And there were 2 separate surveys. One was internal for members of the fire department, and one was external that was opened up to the entire community. And the full results of both of those surveys are contained within the master plan. So there are 6 major long-term opportunities that we're going to just kind of walk through tonight that were identified, and they really should become the foundation for the future success of the Southington Fire Department. Within each of those major 6 areas, we've got some short-term recommendations that can help you capitalize on those opportunities. There's 51 recommendations in total within this report. I'm not going to go through them all tonight, but they are all in the report, and I'm just going to give you the highlights. So within that first area, we had agency management and organization highlights. Some of the big things that just kind of came to light as we had these conversations and met with all the stakeholders is that really and truly first, the town of Southington and the Southington Fire Department need to determine their current identity, and then forthright decide where they want to go. What do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a career fire department supported by volunteers? Do you want to be a volunteer fire department supported by career firefighters? What do you ultimately want to do? Because if we don't plan for what you want to be, it's going to be really difficult to get there. Another thing that came out is that you really need to define the roles and the intersection of the authority of the fire chief, the town manager, the board of fire commissioners, the board of finance, and the town council. There's a lot of elected officials, and again, we talked tonight about policy and operational decisions. We need to make sure that everybody understands what their role is and how they fit into the system, and that we're all being consistent on how that works. We always recommend that fire departments evaluate and update and reaffirm their mission statement. The world is changing. The pandemic has changed the way fire departments are operating. So it's time to take a deep breath and just look and say, why are we here? Are we doing what we need to be doing? Do we need to change what we're doing to better suit the changing needs of our community? And just make sure you're positioned to move forward. And then another area that we want to talk about in this area was administrative staffing. The role of a fire chief is becoming more stressful than it ever has. We're seeing national shortages of people that are capable of being really good fire chiefs, and that's because the demands are 24/7. I'm sure your fire chief has his phone on all nights and weekends, but when we looked at the administrative staffing in your office, it's extremely lean. And what that's going to lend itself to is burnout. People don't want to be fire chiefs for very long, especially when the workload is really, really difficult. So, one of the recommendations, and there's some numbers in there, we've laid it out within the report, but you really probably want to look at increasing administrative staffing just to make the job of fire chief more sustainable and not to burn people out too quickly. The second area of opportunity is staffing, recruitment, and retention. We do recommend that you conduct current compensation structures, models, look and see what other fire departments are paying for staff and make sure you're competitive. The only way you're going to get the best people is if you're paying competitive wages. We also spent some time evaluating volunteers, and I think it's important to say that volunteer firefighters are not free. There is a cost that goes along with having volunteers. They require resources, they require support, but it's important to manage those costs as well. So the first thing we looked at when you look at the numbers in the report is that you're going to see that if you have a limited amount of money, and I'm sure you do, nobody has unlimited spending, the best bang for your buck is really to find ways to entice the current volunteers that are here that have experience and are trained to stay. Nationally, we're seeing trends, people just don't want to volunteer. But the other thing we're seeing is that people that start volunteering don't necessarily have that commitment to doing it long term. So if you have limited money, that money's better spent trying to keep the people that are here and doing a good job than it is to go looking for new people that may decide to quit after a week or two because they just didn't like it. And again, there's a full detailed analysis of how that is and why that is, but your current volunteers should be your priority. And then we also recommend establishing participation requirements for volunteer firefighters. We did a sliding scale and did an analysis, and you'll see that the more active a volunteer firefighter is, the less overall cost per call it does. So if you're paying somebody and training them and providing all these things and they're only coming to a few calls a year, you actually hit a break point where they're costing you more per call than a full-time paid firefighter would be. So it's very important just to monitor that and making sure that you're actually being very prudent with where you're spending the money. Third opportunity is going to be service delivery. And Stuart talked about it in his presentation, but all staffed engines and ladder trucks really should have a minimum of 4 personnel. That is a national standard for NFPA. That's a recommendation guideline. However, we are in the state of Connecticut. We're an OSHA state. OSHA does require 2 in, 2 out. So we're not saying you can't operate a truck without 4 people, but you can't go into a burning building without 4 people. So they're either not going in or they're waiting for that second truck coming from wherever it is before they're able to actually initiate internal firefighting operations. Another thing that came out during the evaluation is emergency medical response protocols. We are recommending that the town really needs to evaluate your current responsive protocols. And the reason for that is you have firefighters and you have police officers in addition to your ambulance service. They're responding to medical calls. However, there are multiple instances that we found by reviewing the data where the closest available trained resource is not always being sent. So for instance, police officers are usually emergency medical responders. Fire department is emergency medical technicians. It's a higher level of training. You've absolutely got situations going on in this town where you may have a trained firefighter with a automatic external defibrillator in a fire station that's closer to a patient in cardiac arrest, but they're not being sent because of the way your protocols were sent. I think it's really important to evaluate that and make sure you're sending the closest, most qualified resource to those calls to get the people the help they need in the timely fashion. And in a cardiac arrest, that really is the difference between life and death.
May I ask you a question, Mary Ellen? So who would be the decision maker in that situation? Would the dispatch officer, the dispatcher?
They're operating on protocols that are given to them. So the question is going to be who's responsible for writing those protocols.
Probably dispatch.
Yeah, that's like in AMR, the police department and the fire department do our protocols.
I think it's a very valid point. Yeah. So we'll talk offline.
So you're absolutely right. That protocol really needs to be updated.
Yeah.
You want to make sure the closest trained resource is being sent. You don't want somebody waiting when they could have had help quicker.
Exactly.
Can I ask Jimmy, what's the current protocol?
Protocol is that it goes through dispatch, right?
get called if there's an AMR delay or.
Or police.
But if they're trained and they have the capabilities and it's a true life-threatening emergency and somebody needs an intervention, it would make sense to send the closest
them to
available
go.
resource. You know, and that's what this whole emergency medical dispatch allows you to do. You don't have to send them on every call, but you should send them on the calls where it could make a difference. If somebody's bleeding or not breathing and full cardiac arrest, those are life-threatening emergencies, and you would absolutely want the closest available resource.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
And then, and Stuart talked about it again, you know, the fire department's travel times are more than double what's recommended by the national standard NFPA 1710. So again, you need to balance the cost of placing additional resources versus the benefit of a quicker response. But you've got some really long travel times just because of the way the town is laid out and the number of staff you have in place.
Yeah, excuse me, and where the fire stations are. Right.
Where they are and which ones are staffed, because don't
And
forget,
which
you're
ones are
not staffing all of them. So that's
Are
causing.
there recommendations in here to possibly look at new fire stations in different
There are
areas of
recommendations
town?
for optimization and where they would be best located. Absolutely. Yep. So then the fourth area out of the six is training and professional development. So one of the recommendations is that there should be a formal feedback mechanism for the firefighters. They're the ones being trained. We need to find out how effective is the training. Are they getting the training they want? Is it working for them? And make sure we're continuously monitoring it to train them for the job that they need to do. One of the most important things I do want to highlight is it really needs to become a priority to incorporate annual live fire training into the training program here in Southington. When we met with the firefighters, we heard that it's been multiple years since there's been a live fire training evolution for most of the firefighters. I understand there's a cost associated with it, but structural firefighting is the most high risk, low frequency event that they're ever going to participate in their duty as firefighters. So we don't want them practicing that on TV or on paper and then hoping for the best. We want them to have the opportunity to work together with their equipment and their personnel and be proficient at that. And you can't be proficient at that if you're not making sure that they're getting training. OSHA does recommend annual live fire training. There are ways to get around that by doing different other events, but truly there's no substitute for live fire. And I think it really needs to be a priority that you need for the safety of your firefighters and your community to make sure that they get annual live fire training.
And those, excuse me, those need to be done at a certain location, obviously.
They need to be done at an approved training facility, correct? So there are multiple facilities around here. You could absolutely go, it would have to be out of town because presently you don't have one, and that's another recommendation we're going to make. But, you know, you can do them on multiple shifts and rotate people through, but you really need them to have the opportunity to practice and to be exposed to the fire and to work together. And then another recommendation is the professional development program for all the positions within the fire department. Again, you know, fire departments are getting more complicated just as other areas of government. And we want to make sure that we have people prepared to take the next step. And you know, the fire department's a little different because just because you're a good firefighter doesn't mean you're a good leader or a good manager. So it's important to start developing our officers at the early stages about communication and managing people and how to get people who don't necessarily want to do something to do it in a way that makes sense. So you know, we really do need to start looking at what are the roles that we're going to need them to fill and how do we prepare the people to be ready for those jobs when it's time for them to do that. Fifth area is prevention programs. So, you know, part of this was a community risk assessment. And when we look at the members of your community that are most susceptible to having emergencies and or having negative impacts of them, your high risk age groups are going to be people over 65 years of age and under 5 years of age. Those are people that, you know, need additional assistance. So a targeted community risk assessment and prevention program would be a huge help to help protect those people from the dangers of fire and other accidents. Another one that came to mind when we looked at your numbers, you'll see in the report, is people with disabilities. You have almost 4,000 households here in Southington that include at least one member of the family with a disability. So again, targeted prevention programs. Do we know where these people are? Are we working with them to make sure they have the resources they need to get out? What can we do in advance of an emergency to make sure we have better outcomes? Those are areas that we really need to be planning for going forward. Targeted smoke detector program for any residential building that's, you know, more than 10 years old is another area that, you know, prevention efforts can be really effective. And then one of the recommendations we did do is talk about looking at your plan reviews. Your fee schedule really could be increased when we looked, and there's a full analysis in the report of other communities and what they're charging. It's accepted practice, but I think you're missing a revenue opportunity if you don't look at perhaps reconsidering and increasing fees for plan reviews. And then the last area is facilities and apparatus. And just as we spoke about, you know, they need the live fire training annually. Right now, you're right, you do not have a facility here in town, so people have to go out of town to do that. But I would highly recommend that you explore the possibility of having a facility here in town, especially if you're trying to maintain a volunteer fire department. They work all day, they're out of town. You don't want them to have to come home and then go at night or weekend out of town and make this any longer than it needs to be. We need to make it as easy as people to volunteer as possible. And with the paid staff, we don't want to be paying them to travel when we could keep them in town on overtime, get them trained, and get them back to work. And then when we look at your station, storing your turnout gear in well-ventilated rooms will prevent additional firefighter exposure for off-gassing for chemicals. Firefighters are highly susceptible to cancer. And one of the ways we need to do that is to protect them from the gases. We wash the gear, but you can never get it all the way off. We don't want the gear out in the open in bays, which is where you have them now. They need to be in a contained room, and we're getting that area ventilated so that they're not breathing the vapors coming off of the turnout gear. So as you're looking at renovations, new stations, those are the kind of things you want to keep in mind. And then we're also recommending that you look at a townwide evaluation of all apparatus in your fleet with the goal of eliminating any apparatus that maybe doesn't see regular use or not have a specific or necessary need, and also to make sure you have the right number of the right types of resources. For instance, spare engines. Do you have enough spare engines in the event that vehicles get into accidents or need maintenance, and make sure you're ready to go in those regards. And then the last one is locations for future or relocated fire stations. There's a full station optimization. It's a big chunk of the report when you get it. It shows you all the different effectivenesses and the numbers of what you would get if you wanted to add 2 stations, 3 stations, 4 stations. Again, because you're the policymakers, you're going to see what do you get for your investment and decide, where is that break point for you. So with that, I'd just like to talk about the next step. And you've already contracted to do a strategic plan. And that is, I would tell you, the most important part of this process. The master plan is our recommendations based on national standards. The strategic plan is when you as stakeholders say what is important to us in the town of Southington. That's when the internal stakeholders look at all these things and say, okay, we can't do everything, but we need to pick what's important to us and start working on those. We come back in and we facilitate a one-day workshop with internal stakeholders, identifying the priorities, how long they're going to take, who's going to do it, and we give you a step-by-step roadmap to get you from where you are today to where you want to go. And that's where you're going to decide out of these 51 recommendations, which 5 or 6 do you want to start with? So we talked about the 6 areas. And then ideally, what we do recommend is once the strategic plan is identified and created with all the stakeholders, it should come back to a board for approval. We don't want to send these firefighters out working for 3 to 5 years on committees and making plans if they're not working in the direction that the elected officials want them to go. So it should come back, and we want buy-in from everybody saying, yes, these are the things we want the Southington Fire Department to be working toward. This is the direction of the department. We all agree on that direction. And now we have full transparency. Everybody knows who's doing what, and they're all working in the same regard to get these things done. So with that, I'd stand for any questions. I know we threw a lot at you at once, and I appreciate your time, so thank you for that.
I want to just thank you very, very much for coming in and giving this report. And as I'm listening to all of this, I'm looking at Chief Paul and Chief Heath, and I want to just say to you, but for all of the firefighters, volunteer and full-time firefighters, how much we appreciate you all. How much, even with all of this, even with all that we've learned tonight, with the strategic plan and, short on this time and, the ventilation, whatever it is, whatever we talked about tonight. And every day, our firefighters put on their gear and report to their fires, trying to save lives, trying to save property. And I just want to say on behalf of the entire council, we can't be more proud of our firefighters in this town. You have served beyond the call. And so as we listen, I'm sure we probably will have many more questions going forward. And we can't use a whole lot more time tonight. But as we go forward closer to the strategic plan, I'm sure there'll be more interaction with the council that we'll be able to talk further with you. We appreciate your time and your effort. It was a very important study, and we appreciate it. Is that all right with everybody?
Just a quick question.
Yeah,
Madam
go
Chair.
ahead, Val.
Can we get a copy of the full report, the 258-page report?
I'm not, can we?
Yeah, I have it, it's gonna be tough because I have it all on electronic. It's gonna be posted on the website. So what I can do is I can get electronic copies to you.
Yeah,
But
that
I'm
would
not sure
be
your
fine.
servers, your town server should be able to handle it, so put it all in your town server.
That would be great, because then we could really go through it, Val. Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback off of Councilwoman DiPaolo's comment, the town manager is referencing the town website for all citizens to look at as well, not
Sure.
just us.
That's right.
So just to make that clear.
That's right. Chief Paul.
We'll have it posted tomorrow morning, just to let you know, on our website, the full report.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
So tonight, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for to all of you for all of your time. This has been an extensive process, as you know. But looking in the audience, the firefighters in the audience, I just want to say thank you for all they do every single day. As you said, Madam Chair, they put on their gear. They are the utmost professionals. I've got to work with them my entire career, and I can't thank them enough. They do a lot with a little, and we have to do much more to support the department and them in the future. But in the future, I'd also like to thank the Board of Fire Commissioners, Town Manager, Town Council, and the Board of Finance for all of your support on the concept of this master plan, of which we haven't had before. So thank you to all of those boards. I need to thank all of the members of the Southington Fire Department who did so much research and work in collecting all of the data needed. This includes the in-person interviews and surveys that took weeks and weeks of time. I also like to thank Mary Ellen and Stuart for the many meetings and telephone calls and putting our master plan together. So thank you. This master plan is a roadmap into our future for the next 15 years at least. This document will assist us in developing our strategic plan and adjusting our mission statement to serve those who live, work, and pass through our town. Truly, I believe our department has moved in a positive way already, but we have a long way to go. Close to June 1st, we'll be able to staff Station 3 and located at 35 Clark Street, but keep in mind the daytime hours only. Of the 6 major long-term opportunities in this master plan, there's 51 recommendations for our department. Some of these recommendations were already completed. They were works in progress, and they were being researched ahead of receiving these recommendations. This represents our proactive approach to the fire service delivery for Southington. A department-wide health and safety proactive approach has already been established. Recruitment and retention committees, thanks to the board, has already been established, and the committee has already met. This master plan will be thoroughly researched, and focus groups comprised of both internal and external stakeholders will be created to move into our next step, which is the strategic planning process, aligning our mission, vision, and values towards organization goals that will move our department forward and maintain our commitment toward providing the best service possible to our community. So thank you again. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you. Moving along, Board of Education proposed referendum.
Sure, if I may start on this one?
Yes, of course.
We have the superintendent, obviously, and the chair of the Board of Ed tonight.
Yes.
As I discussed and the superintendent proposed to you before, is that we're time to bring to the council 2 questions that we're hoping that the council will move forward with tonight by giving me the authority to start the process with the bond council. Specifically, we're not going to talk specific about every aspect of the questions. It's more going to be generic because, as you know, the process really doesn't begin until I introduce the ordinance, and that'll be at your next meeting on the 11th of April. So of an overview of it only, the superintendent, please, would you please, or the chair.
Welcome, Madam Chair.
And I forgot, Mr. Romano is Director of Operations. He's also here.
We have a few people here tonight. Good evening, Madam Chair and Town Council members. For those in the audience, I'm Colleen Clark. I have the privilege of being the Chair of the Board of Education. With me tonight is Steve Medancy, our Superintendent of Schools, Peter Romano, Director of Operations, Dawn Anastasia, one of our board members, and I see Mr. Danello, who snuck in. I didn't know you were here, Mr. Danello, from our athletic department at the high school. And we are here to talk to you about our facilities and fields up at the high school, which several of you who came with us last week know are in serious need of some work. So for the more details, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Medancy.
Welcome, Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. And as our town manager just highlighted, I come before you this evening to ask for your consideration of 2 projects for referendum in November of 2022. Later this evening, I know the town manager is going to be discussing timelines and logistics with you relative to these projects. We did introduce the folks that are here this evening, Mr. Romano, Mr. Danello, Chairwoman Clark, if you have any questions that we might be able to entertain. The total cost of these projects broken out over 2 questions. The athletic facilities complex would total $16,945,000. We estimate this project would take approximately 3 to 4 years in total. That would spread the debt service out over time, which would be a benefit to the town and the community. But in addition to that, we have obviously some serious work to do working around the logistics of all the teams that would be using the complex throughout the duration of the project. So there'll be multiple phases to this. For those of you who were able to visit us with us last week, I want to thank you for your time. For those of you who were not able to visit, we have a standing offer to any one of you, because I understand your schedules are busy and these are volunteer positions. Between Mr. Romano, Mr. Donnell, Athletic Director Risser, Principal Crocco, or myself, any one of us would meet you up the athletic facilities and give you a high-level overview of some of the areas of concern and some of the areas for growth and improvement within the complex. Some of the high-level, I think, immediate issues that some of you saw and witnessed, certainly the tennis courts, the sizes of the cracks in the tennis courts, the balls themselves can fit into the crack. They're not just, surface-level cracks. Accessibility of the bleachers. I know many of you have heard from residents in the community, mostly our senior population, grandparents that try to attend athletic events and band competitions and whatnot for children in the community, and the accessibility is a real challenge for those folks as well. So that's an area of concern. The track is, it's a 20-year track, and we're on year 30 with that track. And the wear of the track is to the point that in several areas of it, it's down to bare concrete. The rubber surface has dissipated to that extent. We do know the athletic turf is right about the end of its life. It's right around year 8 right now, but it's, was projected all along to be a 10-year life for that project. So I think the timing of the turf replacement with the track repair replacement is ideal in terms of doing that all at once. And quite honestly, the bleachers, because of just the access to that space, would be an opportunity to capitalize on during that portion of the project. So, with that said, we also know we have some outstanding Title IX issues. We were cited back in 2015 for the girls' softball field. Right. Improvements are about to begin for those portions of the athletic facilities project within the coming weeks. We have work to do on the fences, dugouts. We talked about improvement of lighting on both baseball and softball fields. When you look at the baseball field itself, for those of you who saw it, it's an interesting, you have third base and then it just drops off to a big ravine into left field. So if you're a shortstop flagging a fly ball into the hole, you're just going to fall. You're not getting that ball. So you better hope you have a fast left fielder who can come in and cover you. We're working on trying to do the best we can within maintenance and short-term solutions and fixes. Thank you to Councilman Chaplinsky, gave us a lead on for the tennis courts, and Councilwoman DiPaolo as well. So we're going to work with that contractor to see if we can't have some short-term fixes in the meantime. And I know Mr. Romano is also working with some contractors and vendors that he has relationships with to see what we can't do in the short term, just so that our students can compete at the home complex. Advancing beyond the athletic facilities, we bring to you a project of the remaining portion of the Southington High School roof. As you may recall, we went to referendum on the first half of the roof in 2018. The roof project was completed in 2019. The remaining portion would come with a price tag right now of $6,920,000. That does include solar. And much of that is reimbursable at a percentage level yet to be determined by the state. But I thought it was important to note that. And then in closing, I want to thank all the elected officials, the town manager, the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, for your support of these projects. Understanding that I think ultimately there's a benefit beyond the school district. This would benefit the community at large. Youth sports in Southington is tremendously. Yeah, Siri's having trouble. So youth sports in general is I think a proud community here in Southington. My daughter competes against Southington regularly and comes to a lot of these facilities. I think there's some improvements to the high school facilities that our youth sports teams can capitalize on as well. So we plan on engaging with them to help them see the opportunities that they might be able to capture within the scope of this project. In addition to. So if you have any questions, and if not, I'll stay around for the town manager's portion where we can talk about logistics beyond.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions on this? Chris?
Just one quick, because I know we've talked about this, the partnership with Dave LaPrey and the Recreation Department, because I know that's a big part of this too. Would you mind just sharing with the public?
Sure. There's the possibility, it's an ad alternate, but there's a possibility for a second turf field to be installed immediately behind the existing turf field, and some seating there as well. And I think for the Parks and Recreation program, that would be a wonderful venue at that point for youth tournaments and events, because a lot of it is, right, the way it currently stands, a lot of our fields that the Parks and Recreation Department uses are spread across multiple venues within town. And so, for families that are coming from out of town and trying to participate in hosted events by Southington, it's nice to have all the fields accessible in one location. And also with that second turf field, and issues that you might have in terms of drainage and field maintenance and whatnot are substantially reduced. And so, I'll give you an example. I had shared with the walking tour, my daughter plays lacrosse, and currently they play behind Darren Elementary School. And if you've ever played lacrosse, you need somewhat of a smooth surface, and it's anything but behind Darren Elementary School. And so I think there's a good example of where that youth lacrosse program could be using that turf field, and it would be just a proud opportunity for them as well. And so I think, when you take projects like this on, sometimes there's a perception in the community that this is a nice to have, but I really want to emphasize that if you were able to see the facilities, the maintenance, upkeep, repair that's overdue on these, this is in several instances, it's a need to have from a safety standpoint and from a performance standpoint. Some of these projects are well within their lifespan and time for upgrades.
Thank you.
I'm sure.
Yes, go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry,
Val?
Val was next.
I just wanted to piggyback on that, Steve, because I think that's just so true, that it's so important for our residents to know, and residents can take advantage of going and looking at everything.
Yeah, so good segue. I had a good conversation with Mr. Duplinsky, like in terms of, there are timelines I want to be conscious of, but leading up to that as a district, we plan on to build out several areas to provide information to the community about what the scope of this project will be. We've already taken the master plan that we had received, which was a couple hundred pages. We've digitized that. We're building out a portion of the district website so that people can access the certain phases of the plan to see what some of the scope of the project is and costs associated with those phases. In addition to, we plan on doing some work up at the facility itself so that if people were to walk, there was a good idea using QR codes where you could actually scan, let's say, the baseball field, and you could see what the scope of the project relative to the baseball field and abutting facilities or, boundaries around that project might look like. And I also plan on having a fairly large display at the entrance of Dom's Way so that when all of the families are using this throughout the summer and into the fall, they can get a nice visual of what the master plan would look like at the athletic complex facility so that they can, once they were there, it's a lot easier to see it, similar to what we all saw.
Right, because when you see it, when you're standing right there and you can see the cracks in the tennis court and the bleachers, obviously, the track, and the track is reasonable wear and tear.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's
there's
so long. I mean,
people have made comments, why didn't we maintain this? You can't, there's a certain level of life some of these facilities that you can't put new rubber down on a track every year. It doesn't work that way. It's a surface level installation that over time wears between weather and use. And so that's something, thank you for pointing that out.
and I just wanted to mention too, it's just so important. We've mentioned this before. I know we talked about it when we were up there. So June 23rd is the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And this is just, it's great to see the work that's going to be done at the softball field that will start to bring that, comparable to the baseball field. Now, the baseball field needs a ton of work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to look at not only the Title IX issues, but the complex obviously, really want the Title IX issues to be brought up to snuff. But, for all the students, that are there at the athletic complex and all the youth sports that can come in and use it. So,
big project. I would give a huge shout out to Mr. Romano because in the state of repair that they are, the maintenance department a couple years ago undertook a massive project of trying to repair all the cracks, resurface, and repaint. We kept that completely in-house, that portion of the project, and it looked beautiful at the time, and yet that was only 2 years ago. If you look at it now, it's almost as if it was never done. So, I could go into a whole dissertation about why it didn't hold because of the bituminous surface versus the concrete surface and some of the design of the tennis courts, but there are things like that need to be remedied long term.
Right. And some of the softball work is going to be done right away?
That's slated right now. That's already gone out to bid, that portion. That was capital improvement funds that we had set aside because of the Title IX inquiry prior to the introduction of the athletic complex.
But probably at the end of the season.
Yes, and they would not need to be redone at the end of it, as part of this project. So this is work that for at least those portions are going to be remedied, and they'll be able to.
Yeah, I'm just thank you for again taking the time to bring us around. There's definitely some safety improvements. As we learn more and we talk to some of these vendors and technologies change, it may also be worth us relooking at what our maintenance plan is. What can we do proactively so that we avoid, getting to some of the points that we're at, as they do these new installations. 'Cause I know you were talking about new materials as well. There may be new things that we have to do to keep up on these. So just maybe a good touch point to check on that. One point of follow-up, if I recall, I believe the town approved, you said 8 or 9 years ago, the turf field.
Yes.
At that time, we had a commitment to self-fund the reinstallation of the turf. We knew at 10 years it was going to require that. I believe we had talked, and we're probably about halfway there on that fund. I'd like to know if you can take a look at that. What's the process that we're doing to self-fund that? And again, as we get towards the replacement of that turf field, do we need to do more on the refunding of that? I know that there was a lot of talk about ticket sales and trying to recoup some of the costs of ticket sales. I'd be interested to hear more about how's that been done. Do we, do we need to take a different approach? Because that fund, I think, is really important because, we're going to come back for another referendum on this. It doesn't go away.
Yes.
We're going to have to continue to do this every 10 years unless the new technology says 15 years. But again, that would be worth looking at our policy and figuring out what can we do to ensure that we are continuing to build that reserve.
Yeah, and I would say a couple really quick, probably highlights relative to that point. For every youth registration in town, there's a portion of the registration fee that the families pay goes to the turf replenishment fund. Then there are the ticket sales that go to that, and then there's the rental of the facility as well. And that's kind of those are the three parts, I would say, that feed into the turf replacement fund. And you're correct, we're about halfway at the cash level of being able to fund that. So that will offset and reduce the cost of the turf replacement at the football field by about 50%. And I think lastly, I'd like to also applaud Mr. Romano for the fact that although we're not proud of this, it highlights the importance of this project to be bringing in engineers every year to make sure that bleachers are still safe for yet another season. And we've tried through creative design to see if we can't accommodate with rails and whatnot. And even the light stanchions where the baseball field is, if you stood out there where we were, you can see that the light stanchions they lean. And it's so we have to get the engineers to make sure, okay, are they stable or are they going to hold? And so these are things, if you visualize it, it's just at a point that it's time. To no fault of its own, it's wear and tear, it's years of use. And so it's just timely for the community, I think.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all of you coming out, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along, item 4, reports of special committees. Bill, would you like to give us an update on the ordinance committee?
Sure, Madam Chair. So we met two Wednesdays ago. It was more just an organizational meeting. I think we kind of had a consensus that we're going to deal with the two ordinance that we've been charged to deal with, the recreational marijuana and the flag ordinance. Hopefully we'll have the flag ordinance meeting in the next maybe 2 weeks. And then after that, with the recreational marijuana, the committee will vote and we'll send it to you guys for a final decision.
Will we get the flag ordinance first and then the?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think
good.
that's the plan.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Hearing none, let's move along. Item B, Library Building Committee, appointment of construction manager. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Library Building Committee narrowed down applications for the builder to 6, and we held interviews. At the culmination of those interviews, after deliberation, the committee recommended that we go with the bid from Whiting Turner Contracting Company of Shelton with a base bid of 2.25% for the construction management fee of the new library, and that will be contingent upon our approval, the town council's approval, and successful completion of the contract review.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Can you repeat the name one more time?
Yes, it's the Whiting Turner
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Contracting Company of Shelton.
And just if I may, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, that will be a construction manager at risk. And as the chairman mentioned, the Contract will be sent to my office. I'll review the contract with the town attorney to make sure the town is protected in that contract. Sometimes we may have to bring in a special attorney to look at it. We've done that in the past. We may do that also because it's not a two-page contract. It's going to be a very large contract. So there may be a little bit of time for us to review the contract. It may not be ready for your next meeting.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the Library Building Committee for their diligence in all of this, and look forward to your report, Mr.
The presentations were excellent, by the way. Everybody came prepared, and we had some healthy discussion, and we're pretty happy with the decision. And I did want to also report that we have whittled down the architect selection to 5 from several, and those begin in 2 weeks.
Terrific.
The interviews.
Thank you. Anybody else
Just a
have a
quick
question? Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Jim, the 2.25%, what is that based off of?
It's a percentage of the total cost of the library, so it's what they get paid to manage the project.
Over,
If I may,
May.
there's hard costs and soft costs. It's a percentage of hard costs, which are the actual construction costs, as opposed to soft costs, which are the fees for the architect, the testing that's outside of the contract for any kind of geotech. That's not a part of the contract. It's actually the hard costs. Which are the construction costs. So when the budget gets put forward, the contract will say 2.25% of the hard costs, which is actually a standard fee. I think it's identical to the fee we had at the middle schools and the calendar house. But that being said, we define the hard costs as the budget goes on. So it's kind of we won't know the exact figure until we figure out what the budget is and what the hard costs are going to be. But it's 2.25% of the hard costs.
okay. And can it change? It can change.
Well, the budget that's eventually approved by the building committee, that'll set forth what the
What the fee will
2.25 is, yeah, because we won't know until you actually have a fixed budget, and that'll come in when we do the bidding and all that. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right, let's move on to an item of very much on everybody's mind. Item number C, self-insurance. Tom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Self-Insurance Committee met on Monday, March 21st. The first thing on our agenda was that we approved an agenda item going forward for public communication. Surprisingly, we've never had public communication, mainly due to nobody showing up. So that is a formal agenda item now moving forward. The first order of business was we reviewed the fiscal year 21-22 budget, and through February, we are $785,000 over budget on the fiscal year, and this is we're starting to see a trend here. What we're seeing is based on the input from the consultant, what we're seeing in Southington is not unique. It's across many municipalities. People are going back to the doctors. They're getting their elective procedures. So $785,000 over budget. But I will say that the Self-Insurance Committee is very well positioned to take on a year where we go over budget. We have a very healthy reserve balance, which is currently at $12.9 million. Next, what we did is we took the actuarial projections from fiscal year 21 and 22 to come up with an updated budget number for fiscal year 22 and 23. The previous amount that was recommended by the Self-Insurance Committee was from December of 2021, so less months of data. And based on the updated projections, we increased the fiscal year 22-23 budget to $25.5 million. That's our expected paid claims and admin fees, and we are expecting to utilize $1 million of fund balance. So that comes to a net cost to the taxpayers and the employees of $24.5 million. And as I'm sure we're all aware, the Self-Insurance Committee did make a recommendation on February 16th to switch insurance providers to Cigna. But we did have an update on that. Our self-insurance committee was able, our self-insurance consultant was able to, Joe Spurgeon, our consultant, heard back from Anthem late last week. And Anthem took steps to retain our business. And I would like to briefly highlight the updated items that are presented before us this evening. They have agreed to remove the potential for stop-loss lasers all 3 years of the contract. They have also agreed to a stop-loss rate cap of 60% in years 2 and 3. What that means is that they cannot raise the stop-loss premium more than 60% in 1 year, which protects the town. They are providing a 3-month fee waiver in year 1 of the contract. They will provide a credit to subsidize the costs for Southington to obtain a COBRA vendor should we decide to do so. And they have increased our wellness fund from $50,000 to $75,000. And executive leadership of Anthem has agreed to step in and take a more hands-on approach to any unresolved service issues. So there was a lot of back and forth, but I wanted our self-insurance consultant did a great job of getting these updates from Anthem late last week. So I will, based on those items there, I'm going to put forward a recommendation for this council that we take action to approve Anthem for the next 3 years for our self-insurance administrator. And we will vote on that later this evening. Before I end, I just want to thank some people involved in this process. It was a long process. It went back several months. First of all the vendors who responded to the RFP. There's a lot of vendors that are very interested in Southington's business. All the employees in the union leadership, thank you for your understanding and commitment to the town. And town staff, this was a lot of work for town staff. I want to give a special shout out to Michelle Passamano. We gave her the self-insurance committee gave her the charge to take this issue and run with it. So thank you to Michelle. The entire self-insurance committee and our insurance consultant, Joe Spurgeon. So I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Perry if he has anything further to add, and after that, if there's any questions from the council, I'd be happy to address them. And I know the town manager is also going to briefly touch on this topic later.
Thank you. Jack, would you like to share something?
Thank you, Tom, and I think you did a great job explaining it. Just want to let everybody know that the process was bipartisan, with the whole self-insurance committee. The town staff was great to work with as well. Like Tom said, Michelle, she did a great job, and she listened to what the self-insurance committee gave her as far as what we were thinking was best. I also want to point out that it's very important that everybody knows that the self-insurance committee is responsible for being fiscally responsible, as well as doing what's best for our employees of the town. And as a small business owner myself, I know it's very important to listen to your employees and what they think is best or what their concerns are. So I wanted to thank everyone for all the emails and the outreach. Obviously, I haven't spoke to everyone, but I think it's very important to listen to the employees and do what's best, and not just, again, you got to find that happy balance. So it was very nice to hear that Anthem, sharpened their pencil, and they were doing what's best for our taxpayers, as well as being able to keep them for the town. I think that was awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything? Yeah, please, Paul.
Thanks again to the Self-Insurance Committee. I want to just make a couple points for those who may be watching this and may not be familiar with the process or what self-insurance is. And thanks, Tom, for your leadership, and Michelle for also driving this. When people think about insurance, they think about going to an insurance carrier, and they pay a monthly fee with their employer, and they are insured by the insurance carrier. When you have a self-insurance situation like the town of Southington has a pot of money. That pot of money is collected from the employees and from the taxpayers. So it's always, just like your cable bill or your mobile phone bill, it's always good to do a vendor check and make sure that you're getting the best bang for your spend. Whatever that is, because you get scope creep over time. If you don't touch it for a long time, when you check your bill, all of a sudden you see your cable bill went from $150 to $200, $250, $300, and next thing you know, it's out of control. So a lot of what the Self-Insurance Committee does is also forward-looking risk mitigation. So I think the feedback process from the employees was spot on. It was great. the work the Self-Insurance Committee did to try to, vet all of the proposals, and hearing back from Anthem that they were willing to keep our business, I think put us in a great position to offer the best of both worlds. So I wanted to say thank you to everybody involved. I know the road maybe seemed a little bit bumpy, but without the feedback, without the hard work and the diligence, and without the current vendor coming forward, things could have looked differently. And I think that we got the best of both worlds here. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for that. Good job.
Great. Anybody else?
That was going to be mine. I was going to say very similar. So I will say, I'll say that obviously I want to thank the Self-Insurance Committee, most important for me, my staff. The Finance Department is also very big in this. Michelle worked very, very hard on it. And it's tough when you're given an assignment to implement policy. I know I have to do that every day. It's a very difficult job. A board tells you to implement policy, but I think in this particular case, Paul stole my language. It's the best of both worlds. We were able to look at it and say, okay, at that moment in time, there was a company that we felt was in the best interest of Southington. That in turn then turned into us being able to go back to our current vendor, and our current vendor saying, okay, we respect your business. Here's what we're willing to do. And a couple of those areas, and I won't talk about what I said in executive session, but there were some areas that without going back made me very nervous as your chief administrator. I no longer have those issues anymore because now Anthem stepped up and took away those doubts that I had. So thank you, obviously, to this board, who hopefully will vote on it tonight, to Self-Insurance Committee, but also where the rubber hits the road, the people have to deal directly with the staff. And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Amelia. And thank you, Christina, who handled that part of it. And thank you, Jennifer, who's not here, but she also handled it on behalf of the BOE, who also had a very difficult job here. So thank you to all of them. I appreciate their work.
Anybody else? I add my thanks also to all of the town employees who took the time to write to us. All of the town employees that were concerned and that took a minute to let us enter into your life as we read about your concerns. And so it was very important. I'll tell you, I believe when Mark asked our rep to please go back and to talk again, it was kind of like a Hail Mary. We weren't sure at that point if we were going to have as a final product. But, just everyone that worked together, thank you. Self-insurance, thank you, town employees, thank you, our representatives. I am very, very happy that this has come about. So thank you. Thank you all, the council. Let's move on a little bit. Town manager's report.
Madam Chair, obviously you heard today about the request for 2 questions to go to the voters in November. Let me go through the process, and I know I'm going to bore most of you, but it's important that some of you, as well as the people watching us, understand how a referendum works in the town of Southington. There's a multi-step process. The first step is the request from the agency. In this case, the Board of Education is asking us to look at 2 questions. So the first thing that I have already done in anticipation of your vote tonight to have me move forward is I've contacted our bond counsel. Our bond counsel will start preparing tomorrow with your vote the documents necessary for me to introduce an ordinance. Now, an ordinance is actually just like any other ordinance. You follow it, and we set forth what we plan on doing. In this case, asking the voters to spend X number of dollars for the field and X number of dollars for the roof at the high school. At that point, I will introduce, and then you will take votes on the 11th, if you so desire, to send this particular request to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to the Board of Finance. I'll be recommending to you, as well as the bond counsel, that the Planning and Zoning Commission act on it through a brief presentation put on by a member of the Board of Education on May 3rd. We're going to request that the Board of Finance hold the required public hearing on May 11th. And then finally, we come back here so you can hold your public hearing on May 23rd. Obviously, I'm bypassing the May meeting where you're going to be doing the budget, so May 23rd. With that in mind, those are the dates, hopefully, that you'll approve me moving forward with tonight. With that in mind, I'll be obviously working with the superintendent on doing the presentations to both Planning and Zoning and the Board of Finance, and then back here again. So at your meeting on the 11th, I don't think we'll need another presentation on behalf of the Board of Education, but the superintendent or one of his reps will be here to answer any questions you have when I introduce the bond ordinance.
Very good. Any questions?
Is it a bifurcated referendum? Is it either
2
or?
questions. There'll be 2 questions, yeah. Yeah, they're not associated with each other, so they will be 2 separate questions.
Very good.
The public hearing will be the same night.
Yeah, they're going to be, they're going to be a
Both
public hearing. I'll be requesting of the chair that we hold a public hearing for both of them at the same time so that people don't have to come up and down. So they'll talk about them. But when you take your vote to move forward in May, assuming that's the case, you'll take two separate votes, but both the votes will be to send it to the taxpayers on, I may have the date wrong, November 8th or something like that. So we'll have the dates at that point. Any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Next.
Okay, the other item I have is a recommendation from the Public Works and from the Public Works Director. There, two roofs have to be redone in Southington, one on the Panthorn Park garage roof and the other one on community service shingled roof, both of them through the Easy IQC system. Millennium is the one that we chose. You could do it on one vote when we get to that point, but the first one with contingencies will be $19,525. That's for Panthorn. And then for community service roof with contingency will be $40,470. Any questions on that? And then, Madam Chair, as you know, we put money away. Myself and the council, put money away toward the town roofs every year. So as these roofs come due, we set the money aside, and the money's already in the budget for the year.
Very good. Any questions of the town manager? Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Millennium, that's the same vendor that we've used for the police department, and then there was one other one as well. Fire
Department, that's correct, yes. And they've all had good ratings on all of those projects.
Very good.
There's no other questions, Madam Chair. We will have an executive session tonight for heart and hypertension. There'll be no action outside of executive session.
Thank you. Let's move on to the town attorney's report, please.
Nothing for the public, Madam Chair. Attorney Sheffy is in the audience, and he's standing by for executive session.
Thank you so much.
Can I say, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to make a point. Alex, did you, we had a challenge to us about a meeting. You examined that, right? And,
did.
And what was your finding?
So there was a challenge regarding an illegal meeting held.
Alex, can you speak to the mic?
Oh. The issue was there was a challenge that there was an illegal executive session meeting held earlier this month or late last month. I looked at it. The agenda was properly noticed. The executive session was on the agenda. And I can't speak to the specifics of the meeting, but it had to do with contractual employment matters as well as possible land acquisition. So it fully fell within the state of Connecticut and the federal government's exemptions for the public.
Thank you.
No issues whatsoever. I also did brief the chairman of the Fire Commission, and he's well aware of the rules as well for his commission.
Thank you so much. I wanted to get that on the record. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. So, I take very seriously what the members of the public say. That's the beauty of this council chamber is that everyone gets their 5 minutes to speak and we listen. And you can say whatever you want for the most part. You really can. So I took to heart what was said at that podium regarding an illegal meeting. I mean, Attorney DePaulo and I have professional licenses. I've been in multiple states. There's reporting requirements, things like that. So when you get accused on the record of something like that, it has a nefarious intent to it. So I didn't know who the person was. I'd never met him before. I've never seen him. Then I found out he was a fire commissioner. Is that correct? A fire commissioner. I don't know what capacity he represented himself in. I didn't really pay attention.
That's accurate.
But, listen, if you're a commissioner or you sit in this town, you're going to come and say something on the record, put it in writing. Put it in writing or make an FOI request. I want to know what information that gentleman had that he was so confident to come in public and accuse us of an illegal meeting. And, I'm going to stop there, but that's very serious. And I'm happy to hear what you said, Attorney Riccadone. But, a fire commissioner to come here in front of us like that, I was shocked when I found out who it was or what role he has.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I guess the question I have is, was a formal complaint filed with FOI Commission on this?
I can answer that. No formal complaint has been filed with my office or Mr. Shoda's office. I don't know if you, the council, received anything formally. The only thing we're on notice of was the public communication at that meeting.
Because I guess, and that goes to my earlier request about FOI, some education on that. So if a complaint was filed, then an investigation would be done, and we would be needing to get something from the FOI Commission to say, you're fine, that was a legal meeting. Correct?
Partially correct, yes. If it would come through my office, I would determine if there was something illegal. If the complainant didn't like the answer that I gave, they have the opportunity to appeal that at the state level to the commission.
To the commission. So
Yes.
so the commission doesn't get involved unless there's an appeal?
Unless the complainant brings it directly to
the
any
FOI commission.
citizen could bring it to the commission if they'd like to. But typically it starts at my level where they request documentation, information, an explanation. And then if I say I don't see a violation or they don't like the response, so say someone asks for documentation, I give them what I believe is accurate and I withhold certain things that I believe are withholdable under the laws. Then at that point, I provide them a list of a general list of things that were withheld in the reasoning. If they want to push it further, they can go to the state to appeal my decision.
Okay.
Yes, hang on, Chris, Jack had his hand up. Jack?
Madam Chair, thank you. So I'm going to be honest, I thought it was under my understanding that a complaint was filed with the state. I could be wrong with that, but I think, again, it gets back to that point that, we should be looking into this more and maybe we have some action tonight on, advising our town manager to look into doing, some sort of seminar. I think this is very important for transparency within our government to show that we're doing everything possible and that, again, obviously the gentleman had great concerns because obviously he is a fire commissioner. So I don't think we should also shun somebody for having a concern. They're supposed to come here. And I don't ever want anybody thinking coming to this podium, it's very intimidating. I've been on that side of that podium. You're standing, everybody's sitting. So I just don't want to, attack anyone or try to shun them from coming up and speaking of their concerns. That's the best thing about our government is we could talk about this stuff. So I would love to make a motion to add to our agenda this evening to advise our town manager to look into, seeing what we can do to make sure that we're being as compliant as possible with FOI so that, our government is as transparent as possible.
If you
Can I just interject really quickly? Just wanted to clarify for Councilman Perry, my office nor Mr. Shoda's office has received a complaint or notification from the state. One could have been made, but we would be notified right away. We haven't been notified. So that's just from what we know. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, just wanted to clarify that.
I just wanted to finish because as Councilwoman DiPaolo was talking earlier today, we said we were going to discuss a seminar in that at our next meeting on the 11th because without all the facts, I would like to read it first and then go forward with it. But you're right, Mr. Perry, it is a very serious thing and we need to be open and transparent. We also have to be mindful that that people can accuse for various reasons. I want to always believe the best about people. But the fact that a formal complaint has never been made with as far as I know, we would be notified right away, our town attorney, and certainly the town manager would report. So we're going to discuss it, Jack, and I think at our next meeting, I think we'll get something here. And as the town manager said, it might be very good to have him come in and give us a little seminar.
They're always helpful.
That'd be great.
Well, Madam Chair, and I guess that's my point is, I think, again, we entrust our town manager to do what we think is right. So I think us giving him that authority to start that conversation is important. And kicking the can down the road, I don't think is the right way of doing this. Yeah. So again, I would love to see our town manager to start the conversation to get this ball rolling to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our citizens.
I appreciate that, but right now, did you make a formal motion, Jack?
I can.
No, I didn't know if you had. If you're fine with us going on, our next meeting, we're going to have a full discussion about it. If you want to wait till then, that's fine. I don't want to stop you from doing what you want to do.
No, we'll wait till the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. All right, everybody's okay. Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to, Councilman Perry just said it too. For Commissioner Wilson to come forward and speak, I think he was doing it in a respectful manner. He was saying it right to us. He was coming to the council. So for Bill, for you to call him out like that, I don't know that I feel that's the most appropriate. Again, he was trying to come to us, brought a concern. The town attorney looked into it, and that's fine. We can move on. But you know, to now go back to that issue is a little concerning to me.
So Victoria, I said one thing. So I wasn't going to say, because I don't make it a political process, but I mean, he's also worked for the Connecticut Democratic Party and he is an operations director. So again, there's a political undertone to it. I was generally just blindsided by it. But if we're going to go down this road and it's going to be political, now he accused all of us, but apparently 6 feel he accused us, 3 didn't think he said anything. But just make the complaint in writing, do it the right way. If he makes a complaint, it's fine. That's the way the process works. But don't skirt around it. If you have evidence, make the complaint. Don't just sit here and go to a podium and say, oh, there was an illegal meeting. If you have evidence, make the complaint. He should make the complaint in writing. That's what he should do.
Okay.
Fine.
Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Just one final thing. I appreciate Councilwoman DiPaolo's suggestion for a future meeting. I think it will be beneficial for the public and us. But just to point out for the public, for example, tonight, we have listed executive session, and then we have the subject matter. It probably should say contractual, H&H. Maybe some people don't know what that is, but that's contractual. Sometimes it says real estate. So I think we always do identify why we're going into executive session. But you know, I certainly welcome the increased discussion and for the public and for all elected and appointed members. So I look forward to it.
And Madam Chair, if I may, every elected and appointed official in Southington must get an ethics briefing by me or Attorney Bedard within 30 days of being sworn in. We do cover FOIA, but again, we don't cover it in a large amount of detail. Just agenda has to be published. All your communications are subject to disclosure, but we do not give a formal briefing about just that.
That's fine. Very good. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on. Are you done, Attorney?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to public communication. We would ask you to come to the podium. We will be respectful towards you, and we would ask the same in return. You will have 5 minutes. Please go ahead. Anybody wishing to speak tonight? I would say that I don't think there are any youth here, but one of the things I'm very concerned about, if a youth comes forward without parental knowledge, I'm very concerned about that. So if you're under the age of 18, I'm very concerned that we would have kids talking about very personal and private things without parental knowledge or consent. So having said that, I don't think this is a youth. So, I mean, it's okay. We're all set. Come on down.
ID checks.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So I really don't get up here a lot to speak. I really don't like speaking in public. So, but I'm Kevin Guy. I live at 45 Burlington Street. So I want to talk to you guys about 2 different topics, but they're conjoined. And also know that I'm also not just talking just to speak about on behalf of myself. I'm also talking about other people in my neighborhood. I've even gone from house to house, from Pleasant Street, all up to Stonegate Road, knocked on every single door and talked to every single household. And just so you guys know that they've all agreed with me to these topics. All right. So if you guys have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask.
Madam Chair, sir, would you mind just talking right into that microphone? We don't want to miss a word.
And what is your name again, sir?
Kevin.
Kevin.
Can you hear me now?
No, you can't. Thanks. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. I'm very quiet.
I know.
That's okay. It's all right. Take your time.
Did you get his name?
So, topic 1 is the snow removal on Burlington Street from the sidewalks from Butternut to Stonegate. We're getting done for approximately 30 years, and as of about 3 years ago, they stopped. Usually they get done by the town, by a third-party vendor, and usually these sidewalks get done because it's a main artery within the town, and also because it is in approximately to all the different schools within town. Sorry, I lost my place. They stopped, due to a main artery and its close proximity to schools. Due to the drop-off order within Hatton Elementary School, the motor vehicles have to go down Burlington Street to Pleasant to Spring Street. And when they exit, they actually come out Arlington Drive, which is right there where the sidewalk is not getting plowed. I'm not really sure why this stopped getting plowed. I did reach out to Mr. Romano and to the superintendent over at the highway department. They said, oh, well, the contract's changed. I'm not sure if it's true, but if it is, I would like to see those sidewalks to start getting plowed again. Like I said, this is not just a street. This is actually a highway that the kids are walking along. The kids that are on Stonegate, they tend to like to walk along this sidewalk to their school, which actually brings me to my second topic. My second topic is a couple years ago, there was a motion to eliminate the access pathway from Berlin Street to the back of Hatton. This, unfortunately, I think was a very wrong choice. I guess there was a study done. I asked who did the study. No one's been able to tell me who did the study, when the study was done, or the numbers pertaining to the study. So there's a lot of questions there. My kids, along with Stonegate, Berlin, everybody from Butternut, all use this path. People that walk to go see the open space over there, they all take this path. And in the winter, the town doesn't take care of this. So now that our kids can't go down this path, they have to take the long way, which is along Berlin Street, a highway, Pleasant Street, which cars are now entering to go to the elementary school, and then Spring Street. It literally triples their walk time. These kids are more in danger rather than walking down a safe path. So like I said, I've reached out to Mr. Romano, I've reached out to the highway department, and they've both pointed fingers at each other saying, well, no, it's their issue. No, it's their issue. And I'm getting frustrated because it's like a blame game. No, it's their issue. Go talk to them. And I personally think it's a travesty when our kids and the people in Southington have to go the long way around on a highway, or when there's a bunch of cars because they're coming out Arlington Drive and slipping literally onto my sidewalk where the kids walk. I've seen it. And so basically I'm just asking if we can get this pathway repaved. The town originally did it to save $30,000, which I'm guessing tripled now. But to me, that's a small price to pay and a small project that can have a big impact on this town. So yeah, those are my two topics. I'm done.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. Any questions?
Kevin, could you just repeat your last name for the record?
Guy. G-U-Y. Guy.
Thank you.
Kevin, thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else?
Hi, everyone. Katie Wade, 39 Madeline Lane. I'll be brief this evening. I'd like to tell you that I love raising my children in Southington. We moved here when my husband got out of the Navy 7 years ago, and the community we have found here has been a supportive one for them to grow up in. My oldest son is heading to middle school in the fall, and this past weekend he had his Arrow of Light ceremony, where he crossed over from being a Cub Scout to a Boy Scout. It was in the basement of a church that generously supports the kids in our town and allows us to use their space. They are also flying the pride flag. That is our town. I attended the Ordinance Review Committee hearing, and I was very glad to hear that there seems to be bipartisan support for a process to be put in place for the flying of flags on municipal property. And since that seems to be the case, I see no reason not to be optimistic that a clear process can be put in place before June, as Pride's flag raising was so well received by the majority of the community, as well as government and business leaders last year. And of course, I would ask that you resolve this in the most expedient manner that would allow us to finally fully show our support of Ukraine and our local families with ties to the area, especially the families relocating here that the chairwoman spoke about at the beginning of the meeting. Southington's decision to seemingly prioritize not flying the pride flag, which causes actual quantifiable harm to children in our community, over showing support to the people of Ukraine who are victims of an active violent war that is being perpetrated on them, has been disheartening. I look forward to this being resolved and to our community being able to move forward with respect for our neighbors. And I thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you, Katie. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Last call. Okay, we're going to close public communication. Thank you, everyone who spoke this evening. We appreciate your remarks. Okay. Let's go on to old business. Item A, appointment of charter revision members. Mike?
Madam Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
you have the old agenda.
Yep,
The first
go.
one is action on plan administrator.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I have two agendas going on here. Action on.
Madam Chair, I'm going to recuse myself. I'm going to remove myself
Yeah.
during this.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that too. Thank you. We'll just let Chris get off the dais. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to recommend that we approve a 3-year contract submitted to the town of Southington from Anthem based on the recommendation from our insurance consultant.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second. Any discussion on this? We discussed it a little bit.
Yes.
Already? Anybody? Okay, hearing none, would you call the roll, please, Madam Clerk?
Morelli,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
DiPaolo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes, unanimous. Thank you. Appointment of a charter
One
revision.
second, Madam Chair.
Okay, excuse me. Oh, I was waiting for you, Chris. I'm so, how quickly we forget. Item B, appointment of the charter revision members. Mike, would you
Madam
go-
Chair, I'd like to present 3 names for the Charter Revision Committee. First one being Mr. Mark LaJoy, who's currently the chairman of the Fire Commission, Jasper Williams, who is serving on the Southington Board of Education, and resident Ed Costello, who had prior service some years ago with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Very good.
And would you like us to?
Yes, please.
Okay, and our names, we would like to ask John Barry, former council chairperson, and Tony D'Angelo, a former council vice chairperson, to serve on the Charter Revision Committee.
Very good. Are there any objections to anybody? I would ask,
Those are one motion. Now you need a second.
okay, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, is there a second?
I'll second.
There you go. No, you
made the
can't.
motion.
You make
He
a
can second
motion.
your motion.
Oh, I'm joining the motion. Okay.
Val,
I'll second that.
thank you so much. Would you call the roll, please?
Madam Chair, do we need separate votes on these?
And you need discussion.
Yeah, discussion.
Any discussion? Yeah, any discussion?
Do we need to establish also a time horizon to come back with a recommendation, Madam Chair?
We'll do that in a little bit. Let's get the committee done first. Okay, where are we?
Wait, after this. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So we have all the names, correct?
Now discussion.
Now discussion.
I just want to also say, aside from his service to the town, I think former council chairperson Barry will be a great asset because of his role also serving as chairperson of the State of Connecticut Library Board. So I know that was one of the charges for the
Yep.
commission, so that experience will also be helpful
Very
on a state
helpful.
level.
Sure, that's wonderful.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, so these names are submitted.
Madam Chair.
Anything else? Yes,
Yes.
Jack?
So I just want to re-echo what I said at the last meeting. Again, opening up the charter, I just feel that there should be more inclusion, and I feel that us going on the minimum level of only 5 members of the charter is not doing, I feel, what's best for the town, because again, other things could be mentioned when the charter's opened. So I would have loved to see more people from our community to be participating in our town charter, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. So let's approve the members that we have right now, and then there's a few other little housekeeping things. Madam Clerk.
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
DiPaolo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes, we have a Charter Revision Committee. I would also ask that Mark LaJoy act as chairman of that committee. So, very good. So, one of the things that is important that we, at this meeting, that we have to designate a time when we would like the results of the revision committee to happen. And so, after speaking with the town manager, I believe that by June 1st, there should be, it's not a huge there aren't tons of things that have to be looked at. We all put in our issues, and so I think by June 1st, I would like to see the Charter Revision Committee have the report ready to come back to the council. So, Mark, do we need anything else on that?
You would need to, but the reason why I suggest that is because it's unfair to have your public hearings in July and August. It's just not. So you want to get it back to you by June so you can have your public hearings in June. So 2 months is a relatively long period of time when you're talking about small issues, small by number, not
by numbers,
not
yeah.
in the rest of things. But that the particular case, if they need more time, they could just petition the council to ask for more time before they give their report. But when it comes to charter revision, I don't want this board or the administration to be accused of having public hearings in the summer when people aren't around. So that would be the thing.
Yeah, yes, come on.
Can I just ask the charge, especially with the library change, where does that fall? Is that an urgency? I don't know, because of the project. Is there something that is making this a little bit more urgent?
Well, I think
specifically for the library piece.
Yeah, I think because we're working on the construction of the library and that also kind of goes along with our concern. So so there is a bit of, not an urgency, but focused. At the very beginning, I said a small group focused because we don't have a huge number of issues, but let's get focused. Let's deal with it as we can. We'll have a public hearing, and then with this committee, we'll decide as going forward. So if that's all right with you, I think that
there's also a time frame, because if you want it on the referendum, if you want it to go to
Yeah,
voters,
that's the thing. You
we'd have
gotta
to have
get
that in
in.
place, Kathy, by September, the first week of September. So obviously,
If we
that's
don't
also,
have
that's your
the
time
public
crunch.
hearing in the summer,
Yeah.
then it shuts it down a little bit. Okay. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I guess my question is it proper for, I guess, the council or you to appoint the chair of the charter revision?
I checked that through. It's my appointment, so that's why we'll use Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other discussion? So, Mr. LaJoy's in the audience, and we're going to just give you that challenge, Mark. And I think you're the only commissioner here that we mentioned. So we'll be looking forward to you. You're going to be organizing your committee and looking at all of the things that we mentioned. And Val, you have already
thank you, Madam Chair.
forwarded the...
No, so I will get 5 copies, Mark, of the Model City Charter.
Madam Chair, can I just go over procedurally, because it
Excuse me, two people are talking. Pardon me. Are we talking?
No, I'm not.
Is that okay to do?
It's important procedurally because they don't have a staff. So usually when we have a charter revision commission, my office will work as the liaison, which is we'll work, the town attorney or the assistant town attorney will be the ex officio member. That's how it works. My secretary will be the secretary, which means if you have anything that has to go to the committee, it goes through my office and then goes directly to the committee. That's what I was going to say, Val, because I know you have something. If you get it to us, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be establishing an email list for the committee once we have it. I think the only person I'll need information on is the other gentleman you mentioned, but I think we have emails and everybody else at this point. So we would do that. So make it a lot easier. Instead of you having to worry about sending it to 5 different people, send it to my office and Kim will send it out to them. But the point person from the town standpoint will be the ex officio officer, and that's the town attorney and assistant town attorney.
Okay. It's a pretty good size. I'll get 5 copies though to get to you, so that at least you'll have 5. If that'll help.
One of the things that I do like about this committee that's been chosen, all of them see the seriousness of even touching the charter. So I feel confident on both sides of the aisle that it'll be a thoughtful time and very focused. And I think we have a great charter revision committee. We look forward to seeing what they do. Yes.
Just a quick question for the town attorney. Is there an attorney involved besides you? Did I read that somewhere, that there's a charter attorney?
There's not. I'm just an ex officio that I go to the meetings just like an ordinance or any other meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
And the benign thing is that I'll meet, obviously, when they have their first meeting, I'll have to meet with them to establish a budget because they're going to need a stenographer and a videographer. So there's going to be a budget necessary for that. So in the meantime, I'll get the money out of your lines to do that until they establish a budget. But they will need to videotape their meetings and have minutes taken.
And they're open, of course.
Yep.
Yeah. With that being said, Mark, would it be okay to include me on any email communications with that committee?
Yeah, all you have to do is just, when we establish it, all you do is ask, like for anything else, for any board member, anybody can ask to be put on that list, and you just put the Kim in, and she'll do the same thing like some of you have for other boards.
Perfect.
So just right now, obviously, it's not set up yet, but when the email is set up, we'll do that. Now, that's not for internal communications of the board, that'll be for when the board meets.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on. Item number C, the appointment of the library construction manager.
Make a motion to approve Whiting Turner Contracting Company out of Shelton.
Do I have a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Could I add one thing onto that, please?
Yes.
Subject to successful completion of contract negotiations through my office and the town attorney's office.
I'll amend my motion to include the town manager's request.
And you'll second. Right. Very good. Any discussion? All right. Would you call the roll, please, Madam Clerk?
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
DiPaolo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes. Action on recommendation for Panthorn Park roof and community services roof.
I'll make a motion to award the roof bids to Millennium Builders of Rocky Hill, who identified through the Easy IQ-C program. And I believe the town manager said we can do this in one motion.
That's correct.
Yes.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, let's call the roll. Okay, thank you.
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
DiPaolo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes. Item E, authorization for town manager to begin the referendum process.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to request the town manager begin the referendum process on the Southington High School athletic fields and Southington High School roof projects.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
And I have a second. All those in favor, any discussion, I'm sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? It passes unanimously. Tax refunds? Jack, you have those tonight?
Yes, I make a motion tonight to accept the tax refunds that were presented in our packet.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We're going to be may I have a motion to go into adjournment, please? I want to thank everybody
To
for
executive
being
session.
here.
Executive session.
I'm sorry, into executive session, barring the press and public.
So
for
moved, Madam
an
Chair.
H&H.
Including
Attorney
Attorney Sheppy,
Sheppy
and it's
is
for
here.
heart and protection matter.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Madam Chair, we'll just stay here.
We can just